The places the Buddha stayed at most often were Vivana, near Rajagaha, offered to him by King Bimbisara, and Jetavana, near Savatthi, donated by Anthapika. During all these years, the Buddha worked diligently every day to teach and to propagate the Dhamma. The Buddha usually got up before dawn, took a bath, and then went into meditation to examine people's natures and development. When he found that someone was suitable and ready to accept his teaching, he would go to that person's place and convert him that very day. After daybreak, the Buddha put on his robe, took his bowl, and went for alms from people in the neighborhood. Sometimes he went alone and sometimes with bhikkhus in neat files, everyone with bowl in hand. And in a peaceful and gracious manner they passed by one house after another, accepting food from all patrons. Sometimes there were people who respectfully invited the Buddha to their homes to accept offerings. The Buddha usually accepted the invitation, but only if there was a good reason. At the patron's home, the Buddha would sit on a prepared mat, and the patron would take the Buddha's bowl and fill it with the best food and offer it to him. After eating the food and washing his hands, the Buddha explained the Dhamma to the people who were there, causing them to understand that after doing good or bad things, they would correspondingly gain either happiness or suffering, in either this or in a future life. He also advised and instructed them to practice diligently the Buddha Dhamma after that the Buddha returned to the monastery. In the monastery, the Buddha used to sit quietly in the rest hall or under a nearby tree, waiting until all the bhikkhus had returned from their alms round and had finished eating. Then he went for a while into his room to rest. When all the bhikkhus had assembled in the discussion hall, the Buddha would give a talk that suited the particular occasion.
Or, he would encourage the bhikkhus during their discussions to learn and practice the Buddha Dhamma so that they can attain the Nibbana in this present life. When the Buddha had finished explaining the Dhamma, some bhikkhus often asked the Buddha to outline the main points of the Dhamma so that they could practice and recite the Dhamma in a way that suited their particular natures and development. The Buddha would then consider the nature and the degree of advancement of the individual and give an easy or a deep verse that was suitable for that particular person. After that the bhikkhus dispersed, each bhikkhu would find a quiet place in the forest or under a tree or in a deserted dwelling, where he would sit down to meditate and recite the verses that the Buddha had given to him. The Buddha would also return to his own living quarters. In summertime, if the Buddha stayed at certain places, the people in the neighborhood would come to visit him in the evening. Some came with offerings, some came to listen to his teaching. By various means and using a skillful language, the Buddha always made everyone understand what he said. Everybody, whether rich or poor, educated or uneducated, felt that the Buddha had explained the Dhamma for him. So, after the teaching, everybody was happy and satisfied and showed before the Buddha that he had confidence in the Buddha Dhamma and would put it into practice throughout his lifetime. After the people had left, the Buddha returned to the monastery to bathe, but if there was a suitable river or pond nearby, he might take a bath there in the evening. After his bath, the Buddha would enter into meditation to rest for some time, and then continue to receive bhikkhus coming from other places. The Buddha would inquire about how they were, teach them,
and explain to them the Buddha Dhamma, which was difficult to understand, bringing them to understand it and leave afterwards full of joy. Being tired after sitting all day, the Buddha took his walk at dusk. He walked back and forth in one place within the monastery to get rid of his fatigue and to regain his freshness. Every evening, after his walk, the Buddha would talk again with the bhikkhus. Late that night, important persons, such as kings, might come to visit the Buddha and inquire about certain problems. The Buddha would answer their questions, and they left afterwards feeling very happy after that it was time to go to sleep. The Buddha slept on his right side, his two legs slightly bent, the left one on the right one. His left hand was placed on his left thigh, and his right hand was placed under his right cheek. The Buddha went quietly to sleep and woke up before dawn. Then he entered into meditation to explore the natures of his prospective audiences for the day, and then continued after sunrise to teach the Dhamma. The Buddha had been teaching and converting people for 45 years, yet he always worked very hard, never slackening in his Dhamma propagating work. When he was not traveling on the road, he spent his time not only teaching the Dhamma, but also, because of his vast knowledge and great wisdom, solving problems for those people whom he encountered, and directing them to realize the true meaning of life. He always showed his willingness to help when someone approached him with a problem or question, whether he was a farmer, a gardener, a blacksmith, or a cart maker. The Buddha was never reluctant to answer different questions or explain complicated problems, nor had he even been irritated by any inquirer or unable to answer a question. The Buddha always taught the Dhamma in a way most suitable to the nature of the people, whether they came to learn out of sincerity or whether they were there only to disrupt.
Those who came to ask about the deeper aspects of the Dhamma were warmly welcomed and offered perfect and complete explanations. And those who came to challenge or test the Buddha were always defeated by his wisdom and would finally express their desire to be the Buddha's loyal disciples for the rest of their lives. In the 45th year of his traveling and preaching career, the Buddha had reached his 80th year. He realized that his traveling around was about to end, for he felt his physical strength was declining even though his mind was as strong as ever. Knowing that he could not remain in the world much longer, the Buddha decided to journey north to the foothills of the Himalayas, the region most familiar to him in his younger years. His intention was to enter Nibbana, in which no element of clinging remains parinibbana in that place. So he left Rajagaha with Ananda and a group of bhikkhus. On the way north, the Buddha went through the kingdom of Patali and then turned northward, passing Vesali. The Buddha had stayed in Vesali before, where he received the offering of Amravana garden from the loose girl Ambapali, who had competed with the princes of the country in making offerings to the Buddha. When the Buddha arrived at Bamboo Grove village, he told his bhikkhus to take up residence for the rainy season anywhere they liked, but both the Buddha and Ananda decided to remain for the rainy season there in the village. During his stay for the rainy season at Bamboo Grove village, the Buddha became seriously ill, but later on he gradually recovered, and his pain completely disappeared. One day at noon, Ananda prepared a cushion for the Buddha so that he could sit in the shade of the monastery. Ananda said, "Buddha, I am so happy to see that you have recovered your normal health. I was very sad before to see you so seriously ill.
But I always hoped that you would not pass away until you had given some last instructions relating to the community of bhikkhus," the Buddha said. Ananda, "What can the bhikkhus still expect of me? I have told you everything there is to know about the Dhamma. There is nothing else left. By this time, the bhikkhus should know the way to practice, to check their practice, and to attain Nibbana. I do not keep any secret. With all my heart, I wish the very best for all the bhikkhus, and have high expectations and hopes for them. I have told them everything they should know up to the time of their final deliverance from suffering." Ananda, "I am an old man now. My strength is declining and my time is close to its end. I am 80 already. Therefore, you should depend on yourselves and not seek external refuge. The Dhamma is what you should rely on, and nothing else." Finally, the Buddha repeated, "Ananda, any bhikkhu who is determined to practice is to be considered the most progressive one in the Sangha." At the daybreak, the Buddha felt more comfortable and was able to go for alms in the city of Vesali. After eating, the Buddha left for Pavastupa and told Ananda to bring a cushion so that he could take a rest at midday. While the Buddha was sitting alone under the shade of a tree, he investigated with his mind the cause and the condition of his passing away and concluded that he would enter parinibbana after 3 months. When Ananda came over to him, the Buddha said, "Ananda, on the 15th day of the Visakha month the Buddha will enter Nibbana, in which no element of clinging remains. It is only 3 months away." Ananda begged him, "Please do not enter parinibbana. Buddha, please stay and continue to help people to end suffering." The Buddha said to Ananda, "Ananda, the Buddha has completely finished his karma and will attain parinibbana 3 months from now. Further, death is unavoidable, as nothing can exist forever."
Anandado, not think about this now. Come, let us go to Mahavana Monastery and ask the bhikkhus of Vesali to assemble there. At the Buddha's request, Ananda left. When the bhikkhus had gathered at Mahavana, Ananda went to inform the Buddha. The Buddha went to the place of the assembly, and there gave the bhikkhus many important instructions. Guard your own mind. Do not be heedless, so that you can be freed from all the suffering of the cycle of birth and death. One morning, to have a last look at the city of Vesali, the Buddha and Ananda went for alms there. The Buddha said to Ananda, "Ananda, this is the last time that I shall see the city of Vesali. Let's go to Ba village." At Ba, he took a rest and taught the people there. After that, together with his disciples, he passed those several other villages, finally arriving at the city of Boga, where he stopped at the Ananda shrine. There the Buddha told his disciples that when anyone teaches them the Dhamma, they should carefully verify it against the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. And if it is not consistent with the Buddha's teaching, they should reject it. Then the Buddha pointed out to the bhikkhus the 4 great references for the Buddha Dhamma. Then they continued their journey to the city of Pava and rested at the mango garden, which belonged to Kunda, the son of a goldsmith. The Buddha taught Kunda and his family, causing them to have confidence in and take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma. He then accepted Kunda's invitation to receive offerings at his home the next morning.
In the food that Kunda offered the Buddha there was a kind of fungus, which, when the Buddha ate it, made his former illness to flare up even more seriously than before. However, the Buddha endured the pain with all his strength and continued his journey towards Kusinara. Taking a short rest every once in a while along the way, the Buddha with his disciples gradually approached Kusinara. While he paused under a tree he met Pakusa, a prince of the Mulla clan and the old Rakalama's disciple, who was on his way from Kusinara to Pava. The Buddha then taught him the way to live in peace. The prince gained confidence in the Buddha Dhamma and vowed to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha all his life. Then he respectfully offered the Buddha 2 rolls of fine gold-colored cloth. The Buddha accepted only 1 roll, and asked Pakusa to offer the other roll to Ananda. The Buddha and his disciples then crossed the Kakutha river, took a rest for a while, and then went on to the Hiranyavati river, which was within the boundaries of Kusinara. After crossing the Hiranyavati river, they arrived at Salavana, a holiday resort of the royal clan of Mulla, which was outside the city of Kusinara. The Buddha felt he could go no further and said to Ananda, "Ananda, please prepare a place for me to lie down between those 2 sala trees, I feel very tired." Ananda took the Buddha's big robe, folded it 4 times and placed it on the bed between 2 big sala trees. The Buddha then lay down on his side with his head towards the north. The Buddha did not fall asleep, but only rested to relieve his pain and fatigue. His mind remained as peaceful as it had ever been. Ananda felt that the Buddha was really about to leave him this time, and he could not hold the grief in his heart. So he left the Buddha and went to an isolated place among the trees to cry. He thought aloud, "Unlike other bhikkhus, I have not yet attained the stage of arahant.
I have to continue to learn and practice, but now my teacher will pass away and leave me behind. I shall lose my compassionate master forever and be left all alone." His face became flooded with tears. When the Buddha opened his eyes and did not see Ananda, he asked the bhikkhus who were at his side, "Where did Ananda go?" The bhikkhus replied, "Ananda is weeping in a hidden place. He says that he has not attained the stage of arahant and has to keep on learning and practicing, but that his ever-compassionate teacher is going to leave him." The Buddha said, "Bhikkhu, please go and tell Ananda that the Buddha is looking for him." The bhikkhu then did as he was asked. When Ananda came back, the Buddha comforted him very kindly and compassionately. The Buddha praised Ananda in front of the other bhikkhus, saying, "All the Buddhas in the past had excellent and devoted attendants, such as I have in Ananda. All the Buddhas in the future will have excellent attendants, and they will not surpass what Ananda has done for me. Ananda knows how to arrange just the right time for me to meet with visitors. Ananda has always treated them pleasantly and spoken well with them. Every visitor has found only the highest satisfaction in the way Ananda has received and treated him. When Ananda tells a person something, he always listens so attentively as to surpass all the expectations of Ananda. Ananda has, at all times, been my most excellent attendant." Later, Ananda said to the Buddha, "Buddha, please do not enter Parinibbana in such an improper, out-of-the-way, small place. Please select one of the large cities such as Rajagaha, Savatthi, Visali, or some other city and enter Parinibbana there. In those places there are many rich and powerful persons who are your disciples. They can take the responsibility for your holy remains." The Buddha said to Ananda, "No, Ananda, don't say that. You should not think of this as a small and insignificant place.